Well, good morning. This is the Lew Rockwell Show, and how great it is to have as our guest this morning Mr. David Stockman. David was a congressman from Michigan. I got the chance to meet him when I worked for Ron Paul at the same time. They worked against draft registration and against those who wanted to revive the full-blown military slavery. And I might say among the staff, all the Republican staffers, David was known as a guy who knew everything. And so it wasn't really a surprise when Reagan asked him to be head of his Office of Management and Budget. He wrote later a best-selling book about it, The Triumph of Politics, a great book, by the way, The Triumph of Politics, Why the Reagan Revolution Failed. Also author of another 2013 bestseller, another great book, The Great Deformation, The Corruption of Capitalism in America. His latest book is Trumped, A Nation on the Brink of Ruin, and How to Bring It Back. So David is also the editor and the publisher of David Stockman's Contra Corner. We'll, of course, link to all these books and Contra Corner and so forth. David, if I can summarize the thesis of your book, it seems to be that Trump's diagnosis of what's wrong with America has a lot going for it. His solutions to those problems have less going for them.
Yeah, Lew, first of all, I'm very happy to be with you again. You do terrific work. I read everything that you publish every day, so it's one of the sources in which I replenish my ideas and information and update on what's going on in the world, because obviously what you hear from the mainstream media is almost always not correct at all. But on the book, yes, I would say that the emphasis is on a nation on the brink of ruin. In other words, that's what the book is about. I try to demonstrate how it's created a hugely unbalanced, ruined economy in which the bicoastal elites have prospered mightily as a result of a lot of wars abroad, a lot of debt being generated in Washington, and the bubble finance system driven by the Fed and other central banks on Wall Street and Silicon Valley and so forth. But it's left flyover America high and dry. And there are so many different measures of that. Jobs have been lost, not created. Real median income, if you use an honest measure of inflation, is down 17% from where it was in the turn of the century. And I think that's an important statistic because it's not, a temporary digression in the wrong direction. It's not a few points of decline. It's unprecedented. 17% shrinkage in the median family income when you use what we call the flyover CPI, which actually we think tracks the cost of living more accurately. So that's why the nation is on the verge of revolt here. That's why Trump has come out of nowhere, much to the surprise and chagrin of the entire Washington, Wall Street ruling establishment, and why the media now is conducting such a, frantic campaign to destroy him for fear that fundamental policy questions might at least be challenged and reopened in a way that they haven't been for the last 30 years. So that's kind of what the book encompasses, and then we go into a lot of areas. But the one that I want to emphasize more than others is the last section of the book, Part 3, is entirely a critique of what I call Imperial Washington's interventionist foreign policy. And I think that's timely at the moment because we have Hillary Clinton running as kind of a Cold War hawk when, in the world, it is ridiculous to believe that Russia either has any serious hostile intentions vis-a-vis Europe or certainly our security in America, or even any capacity to create real threat. They have demonized Putin primarily as a cover for explaining away all of this massive trove of emails that's come out in the last little while. So, but I think this is kind of dangerous because the Republican Party was hijacked by the neocons, as you and I well know, decades ago. But now what we find is that the Democratic Party, at least at one point, there was a peace wing. When I was a kid, starting back in the 1970s, as we talked about on Capitol Hill, there was the peace wing senators, and they're all gone. And what we have is Hillary the Hawk. What we have is wars of invasion and occupation in Libya, Syria, Iraq for the third time, Yemen, and we could go on. But the point is, this is pretty dangerous because neither party is representing a honest position in terms of the threats that we have in the world and what we really should be doing, and that is dramatically shrinking our military establishment and demobilizing from this vast, far-flung, empire of military bases and foreign interventions.
Well, it seems to me that I've always thought that the neocons have like a crazy gene.
Yeah.
I mean, as bad as the sort of, if we can describe them this way, the Rockefeller Establishment, as bad as they have been, they don't strike me as actually egging on and really salivating over the idea of a world war. She and her neocon advisors and the neocons in the press and so forth actually seem to, if you wouldn't say that they want a war, they're willing to do things that will inevitably bring about a war, unless, of course, Russia and China too were just to surrender. My guess is they're not going to surrender. So this is a very scary situation. We see the U.S.'s NATO operation moving troops right up to the Russian border. And this is, of course, I remember seeing a wonderful meme once that showed Russia with all the zillion U.S. bases in near proximity to it. And the caption was, "How dare the Russians put their country in the middle of our military bases?"
Yeah, Lou, on that one, I have a similar kind of metaphor. I live in New York City now, actually in an apartment on the 19th floor, and what I've been saying is that from my 19th floor apartment, I can see Russia. But unlike Sarah Palin, I'm not talking about the Siberian landmass. I'm talking about the GDP of metropolitan New York, which is 1.6 trillion, which is significantly larger than the entire GDP of Russia, which means that the Russian economy is 7% the size of the U.S. economy, that their entire military budget of $40 billion we spend every 2.5 weeks at the Pentagon. And yet, to hear the rhetoric coming from Hillary Clinton or the neocons generally, you would think that there is some gigantic threat, coming at us from every direction. This is really absurd, and I'm starting to become startled by how far they're taking this. I mean, they're putting battleships into the Black Sea. Look at the map. Why would we have battleships in the Black Sea? It's like putting them in Lake Michigan, from our perspective. Why are we conducting the largest exercises, even including the Cold War, on the Baltic borders of Russia? Why did we intervene in a civil war that we instigated in the Ukraine with the coup in Kiev in February 2014, which clearly happened, another of these color revolutions with massive amounts of walking around money supplied by the Endowment for Democracy and the CIA and the State Department and many other organs, and hundreds of people on the ground that were allegedly working for non-NGOs, as they call it. That's just a cover for CIA agents in civilian garb. But anyway, all of that has been happening. You listen to some of the debates, and Hillary would get all huffy about how dare Donald Trump question NATO. Well, NATO is obsolete. In other words, our debate has gotten so distorted, and the establishment, narrative is so off base that the idea that NATO should be disbanded, which I believe in, or at least the other countries should pay more, that Trump has raised, is treated as a thought that comes from crazy town. But in fact, in 1989, Bush the elder promised that NATO would not be expanded by an inch if Gorbachev acquiesced to German reunification. And the fact is, he should have declared victory. That was the Bush who should have declared victory, not the one that was on the aircraft carrier after shock and awe, but the elder Bush when the Cold War ended. He should have declared victory, began the process of dismantling NATO and dramatically shrinking our military capacity because we had no enemies left in the world. But instead, it kept it all alive, and that's, idleness is kind of the temptation of the devil. And so all of these institutions needed budgets to be funded. They needed purposes and functions and justifications. So we end up with NATO doubling in size, our security being put at risk if something happens in Slovenia or Latvia, or I guess now even Montenegro. They're trying to put in what kind of, what kind of absolute idiocy is behind all this, but you can't even get it into the debate. If Trump even suggests that he would like to sit down and have a negotiation with Putin, he's called a puppet. He's called a stooge. As I was saying the other day, Joe McCarthy must be rolling in his grave to find that he's got Hillary Clinton out demagoguing him in terms of the Red Scare, the Russia scare. So the positive thing, though, is I think the election is probably over. I think Clinton's going to be elected. That's a bad thing in one way, but there's a silver lining because everything's going to fall apart in the next 4 years. We're going to have a stock market crash like we've never seen before. We're going to have another recession. In fact, we're on the verge of it now. The federal deficit is going to soar back into the $1 trillion zone. The Fed is going to be totally tied in knots without, out of dry powder and not knowing what to do. And all of that, then we can lay all of that upset and dislocation, we can lay right on the doorstep where it belongs, the establishment policy represented by Hillary Clinton. And so maybe there'll be a chance for the system to get realigned, for a grand realignment, for some new party that builds on the libertarian base and the anti-war base and, the Bernie Sanders anti-Wall Street Fed base. And maybe something could come out of that. You never should underestimate the lengths to which the establishment will go to suppress opposition, but maybe there is a silver lining here. And Trump, even if he fails to win the Oval Office, has helped to pave the way by defeating the establishment Republican candidates with their neocon advisors and conducting a campaign that is a rip-roaring attack on the Wall Street, Washington ruling elites. And whether he makes any sense, which mostly he doesn't, but at least he's attacking the right target, and maybe that's a helpful beginning. At least that's the theory that I lay out in my book.
David, it seems that at least Trump has got all the right enemies. Seems like everybody evil hates his guts, so that's something to be said in his favor.
I think I agree with that 100%. You could know someone by their enemy, and they're all lined up. I mean, I find it ridiculous. I don't watch it that often, but every now and then I check in on CNN. It is truly the Clinton News Network. Everybody there is in the tank for the war party, for the status quo, for the Washington, Wall Street ruling elites. These people claim that they're journalists, and now if you listen to every one of them from Wolf Blitzer on down, they preface any discussion of these WikiLeaks damning documents, which are nothing more than party gossip and maneuver, right? It's not some national, deep national security secret. No, but they preface any discussion of them with the words stolen documents. Well, this is ridiculous. What do journalists do except dig and investigate and find things that rulers don't want known to the public, or that politicians are trying to keep hidden from public view? And so that's what they've always done. If you get someone to talk on deep background, that's stolen material that was vocalized. If we follow this theory, obviously Watergate investigations never would have happened. The Washington Post never would have revealed all this. The Pentagon Papers wouldn't have been published. You can go on and on. They have made a joke out of journalism. They might as well just hire CNN out as the public relations department of the establishment, right? And yet, I think what is happening is that it has gotten so extreme, it has gotten so unshackled, so to speak, that Trump is hitting home with his unrelenting attack on the establishment media. And NBC is just as bad, and the other two almost so. But I think, we've reached the point where Trump is at least calling attention to the thought control process by which the establishment continues to rule.
No, I think that's exactly true, and I think that the American people have to, at least to some significant extent, awaken to what you and I have always known. The media are a rigged bunch. They are, in effect, a state media, but I've never seen... I mean, I remember the Goldwater campaign. I thought they were pretty bad against Barry Goldwater, but it was nothing like their constant attacks on Trump. I think they've actually hurt themselves with people. And there was quite an interesting article in Time the other day worrying that, well, of course, Trump is going to be defeated, and thank goodness for that. But there are rumors that he might want to start a third party, a populist, nationalist third party, that, of course, that would wreck the Republican Party, and can't have that.
No, but that's, I think, what I was saying before. There's a chance for realignment here. There are a lot of complicated issues to deal with, but on the fundamental questions of war and peace, on the question of big government and massive public debt, on the question of bubble finance and a Fed central bank that basically serves the interests of speculators in Wall Street, on those three things, on the matter of civil liberties and the constitutional structure of our government, there may be room on those four the domains, let's say, in those four domains, to pull together a different party than we now have today, and one that has no use for either the Keynesian economics that run the country domestically or the imperialist foreign policy assumptions, neocon policy views that drive foreign policy. Maybe it could happen. We'll have to see.
David, has any candidate besides Ron Paul ever criticized the Fed? Now, obviously, as Trump has, he's not a sophisticated critic, but still, it's just wonderful to hear the Fed which is the untouchable institution, not to be mentioned except in the most hushed and respectful tones, being criticized. And as you say, he talks about bubble finance. Is it that? Is it his less warlike position? What is it that you think bugs the elites the most about Trump? Is it that he's not suitable for their clubs? I mean, what is it?
I think more than anything else, it's the foreign policy angle. Because when push comes to shove, the prosperity in Imperial Washington, all these consulting firms, all of these, suppliers to the national security apparatus, that's where all the prosperity in Washington comes from. That's where all the lobbying jobs get generated for politicians who are put out to pasture, either voluntarily or involuntarily. So I would say when he started talking about negotiating with Putin, when he started talking about how stupid can we be to fight both sides in Syria, and when he, said who empowered us to overthrow Gaddafi and so on, or suggested that NATO was obsolete, that's what really activated the imperial city, let's put it that way, and all its media arms and organizations.
It does seem like the only two, at least the only two major powers in the world, although they're much smaller economically and militarily than the U.S., Russia and China, that don't bow the knee to the U.S., seems like they really would like. I mean, I think for a long time I've thought the U.S. Had an ambition and maybe the wherewithal to become the world government. And I guess they see Russia and China as the two impediments. What's going to happen in foreign policy is a frightening thing, and I think people all over the world who are decent are worried about the prospect of Hillary in power. Just very scary business.
Well, I think they should, and if you want a symbolic moment, a kind of metaphor for how dangerous Hillary the Hawk is, I think you've seen, Lew, and a lot of people have, but let me mention it again. That little segment in a tape when she was on 60 Minutes and was asked about Libya and the demise of Gaddafi, and all of a sudden she sets up straight and says to her host, "We came, we saw, he died," and then broke out into giggling and laughter. Okay? Now, the biggest disaster of the many we've had in recent years is turning Libya into a barbaric, outlaw, jihadist-ridden state when, Gaddafi wasn't perfect, but he'd given up his ambitions, his nuclear weapons, and there was no reason whatsoever for us to intervene except, this whole R2P thing, responsibility to protect, based on what turns out to be totally exaggerated rumors about what was happening in Benghazi originally. You remember Anderson Cooper was running around
Sure.
there saying that genocide is going to happen. Actually, what was happening was the jihadists were fixing to take over the country, at least the eastern part of the country, and Gaddafi was on the case, ready to take them out, which he should have. But I think the Libya incident is one example of why she's so dangerous. This open public feud she's now having in public with Putin because, she's trying to distract attention from the content of all of these leaked emails, WikiLeaks. The repeated assertion, which you heard from her in the last debate, that she wants to establish a no-fly zone in Syria, which is really puzzling, since I thought the enemy was the Islamic State, positioned narrowly along the Euphrates River in the dusty plains and broken villages around Raqqa. The thing is, they have no air force. Okay, so why in the world would you have a no-fly zone unless you want to shoot down Russian and Syrian Assad planes? And why would we want to do that when they have done far more to contain the ISIS threat than anything we've been able to manage stumbling around? I think it's also interesting to note that if day after day, these generals who are responsible for a lot of these disasters come on the tube to endorse Hillary. I heard John Allen, who was former chief of staff, last night, endorsing Hillary Clinton on the grounds that she would be a superb commander-in-chief. Well, he's the architect of the second go-around in Iraq and Syria, and we can see how well that worked out. You have a level of groupthink in Washington that's so oppressive that it is any wonder that we don't even do worse things in the world than Imperial Washington is doing today.
Well, if they get rid of Russia and China, I think we can count on them doing worse things. And then have the Keynes's dream of the Bancor, the international fiat currency, and many other horrendous things.
Well, yes, that they could have that in mind, but I think in a way maybe they've hung themselves out to dry too, the establishment. In other words, look at the Fed today. I mean, after 90 months or 94 months actually of zero interest rates, and in a situation where the vice chairman, Fisher, who's the dean, of these Keynesian economists, says, well, we're nearly full employment, they're still debating whether they get the interest rate off the zero bound. Now, the point, though, is they're tying themselves in knots. They're slowly discrediting themselves because, they say they're data-driven. What's the data? So I think there is a chance that when the economy slips into recession and people finally admit it, because, this business cycle is long in the tooth, it's 86 or 7 months old already. But when that happens, and the Fed then, if they try anything radical like negative interest rates, they will really generate a Trumpian political revolt in this country. The retirees and the savers will come out with their torches and pitchforks, and there will be a real attack, I think, on the Fed. On the other hand, if they say, we're not going to go the zero interest rate route, which I don't think they will, they can already see the handwriting on the wall. Trump did an important service to everybody when he put a shot across their bow in the debates and talked about one, big, ugly bubble that's being held up by the Fed. So I think they know that they're far more vulnerable politically than they've ever been before, so they don't go the negative interest route. If they try to confect something like another multi-trillion-dollar QE program, QE3 or QE4 or 5, I think it's going to backfire because they had convinced Wall Street that this was a one-time emergency, 100-year kind of emergency that had to be done and then would be unwound after it was successful. If we go back into recession, it will be a thundering statement that the whole $3.5 trillion worth of bond buying was ineffective, didn't save the economy after all. And if they try to double down, I think it's likely to cause as much panic in selling in the casino as buying. So in any way you look at it, I think the Fed is in a corner and it's going to lose control. And once it does, they'll just sell and sell and sell and sell in waves like you won't believe in the bond market, the stock market, all of the risk asset markets. And I don't think they're alone. The ECB is nearing its day of reckoning. The Germans are totally unhappy with negative interest rates. It's killing the German saver. It's killing the German banks. They realize it's just a backdoor way to monetize the debt of, the fiscal basket cases of Southern Europe, like Italy and Spain, Portugal, France. So I think the ECB is reaching its moment of reckoning. They have no clue. These, lunatics in the Bank of Japan. These people have no clue where they are. I mean, it's a whole nother discussion. But you've never seen anything as lunatic as what they're doing there. They own practically half of the debt of Japan, and Japan is a retirement colony with massive debts. Heading for the wall. So what I'm saying is this 20-year era of central bank credit inflation and falsification of financial markets and bubble finance speculation, I believe, is coming to its final days. And that's, one of the major stories that I try to develop with data and further elaboration in the book.
David, thanks so much for coming on today. Those who had not heard David Stockman before now realize what an eloquent and important thinker he is. Read his books. By the way, The Triumph of Politics, his first book, still very relevant and a great big book, Great Deformation, Trumped. David, keep writing your great books. It's wonderful to have you on the show. And if lightning strikes and Trump should end up being elected, I hope he has you as his chief advisor on all these things.
Okay. Well, it was great to be with you. And, these issues are challenging and in some ways frightening, but somehow I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel. I think, as I said, a country that has been trumped, a people that has been trumped, is a people finally coming alive to the danger and the democratic authority and power that they've lost over the last 30 years.
David, from your lips to God's ear, and thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks so much for listening to the Lew Rockwell Show today. Take a look at all the podcasts. There have been hundreds of them. There's a link on the LRC front page. Thank you.